Free Your Voice podcast.
Welcome to the Free Your Voice podcast, where we are going to talk about, surprise, public speaking. And I'm very happy today because I don't have to speak alone, because I have a great guest here today. And he, in his former life, was an engineer, if I'm not wrong. And now he is a public speaking trainer. And he is also known, if I'm not wrong, as the Danish dynamite of public speaking. Welcome, Asger Lindholdt.
Thank you. Well, awesome. Danish dynamite. Maybe I should keep that one for the international gigs.
Yeah, maybe, definitely.
Production.
Yeah. Maybe you need to put on a soccer shirt, you know?
Yeah, I should. Yeah.
Asger, I have to ask you that question. You were an engineer before, so you build things, and now you help people building their skills, their public speaking skills. Where did that change come from?
Oh, that's a little bit of a long story.
That's okay.
But yeah. Well, I think it comes back to childhood.
Okay.
You know, my dad, he probably had a few challenges showing, love, appreciation. And then I wanted to make him happy. Okay. And then he cared very much about scientific classes, math, chemistry, and so on. So it kind of gave me an interest that way to kind of show him I was good. And so I pursued that for some years. And I actually kind of liked studying it. But then when I got out and worked, it just became very mundane. It was a lot of looking into a screen, which maybe some of you have tried during especially Corona. And I was just fed up with it. And I think I also kind of evolved as a person and wanted to dive into people more. Okay. So that kind of made me shift a little bit. And then I joined Toastmasters, which I know you also know. Yeah. I just discovered, hey, man, this is fun. It's fun sharing your message. And what's also fun about it is obviously helping people. But the thing, when you step up on stage, you also help yourself. You can talk about your challenges, your dreams, your wishes. So really, it has a whole package when you speak. So I think that's the reason why I got into it a little bit late. So I'm probably a decade behind most of my peers. But hey, man, I'm trying to catch up. Anyway.
Yeah, it's never too late. You know that. It's never too late, especially for that. I think talking about public speaking, it's never too late to learn that skill, and also helping people to learn that skill. Talking about that a little bit more when you talk to your clients, that's something that is something that happens to me a lot. That many clients come to me and they suffer from stage fright.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something most of us know. And what is your trick in your courses, in your trainings, to make people speak up?
Well, I think there are a lot of different things you can do, and you have to find your own thing. And I don't think there's one trick. I have a few that I use that are very powerful for me. So I try to give my clients a lot of different techniques and then make them choose what they find is most powerful. One thing I do is I actually talk to the fear. I just hold it up here and, okay, there's something positive. This fear wants me. It actually wants to help me. I believe that every feeling we have is positive in one way or another. It might have a ton of negative side effects, right? But it wants to protect me. And every time it comes, it's like, oh, here we go again. You want to protect me, which is actually a noble thing. So I acknowledge that. I talk to it and I try to find a strategy to say, hey, how can I be protected while still going on stage? So I try to look for solutions. One thing is obviously practicing. Getting good at the skill, discovering what the people you're talking to, what they actually need. And then I also have to remind myself, sometimes I think, oh, this is not so hard. But then I think, hey, man, this was a big challenge for yourself even 10 years ago. And you hear about these challenges people have, and I remind myself, this is a valuable skill. So that's one thing, just really getting in contact with that negative feeling instead of running away from it, connect with it. And the other, I just always think about what's the worst case scenario. Realistically speaking, what's the worst that can happen is you don't get rebooked from your client and they say, you know what, you didn't really deliver. It wasn't that good.
Yeah.
And, you know, my life will go on. I still have my 3 wonderful kids. I have my wife and they're cheering me on just when I step on stage. And a little funny trick, I bring them with me on stage, you know, so I put them up somewhere I can see them and I imagine them. And I close my eyes a little bit before the stage and then they look down at me. They always smile. They always cheer me on. So I'm prepared for the worst case scenario. Of course, I want my clients to enjoy it and love the content, but I can live with the worst case scenario. So those are 2 things.
Pretty awesome to see that often it just needs a little push, a little switch to be moved in the brain to get people from having total stage fright to really become a confident public speaker. In your career as a public speaking coach, do you remember someone or a group even moving from that stage to really public speaking stars, I would say?
Well,
Transformation.
yeah. Well, every time I do a workshop, people move. And what especially moves people is being able to share a personal story on stage. Like when we help them discover, hey, man, this is your message. Hey, this is what makes you unique. And sharing something that they've failed at or struggled at. And then they discover, hey, man, everybody is actually here to cheer me on. Like, you know what? If you share something you struggled with and someone criticizes you, you know what that person is? He's a real dickhead, you know, real jerk. So like 99% of people will cheer others on when they share something they struggle with. And I think a lot of people, when they discover that, they're like, hey, man, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, it's actually going from that. That's also a thing I encounter often. And when people start writing a speech or preparing a presentation, they usually stick with the general things. They don't go into that story because there is firstly that fear to share those stories. So they stick with like the general things, which usually are more, I would say, boring, and you cannot really connect with those things. But as soon as people dive into their own stories, it actually becomes interesting, right? And then there's also this connection with the audience.
I mean, this is where the fun is, right? I want to know, you have asked all the questions, right? Hopefully I get to ask a few later. You know, like I want to know your story, man. What's up with you? How did you get started? And then, of course, when you share your story, I just connect with what's my own story, right? So it's much more fun to get personal stories than just some good knowledge. I mean, of course, good knowledge is worth learning about, but it typically comes more in the end when we've connected with people, heard their stories, start believing, hey, man, maybe it's possible for me to share my story, right? Though that's way more fun.
And this is also something I see, and I'm sure you know that when you do courses or training and you're talking about business presentations, right? And often people then say, yeah, but I can't be too personal. But then actually what happens is that those presentations are super boring and nobody is listening. So from your experience, which are the most common mistakes in these kind of business presentations, and what could one do to do those better?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of mistakes a lot of people do. The first one is talk too much about yourself. You want to talk about the client. The most boring presentations are those typical presentations. Oh, let me just kind of update you on our company. Oh, we're working here. We have this side. We have this many employees. You know, I don't care really. Yeah. Just tell me about a problem you can solve. So diving really into the audience way quicker. I mean, having a few phrases about yourself and your company is okay, but ultimately you want to be curious on your audience and discover what are their problems. And so if you're doing a sales presentation, you know, hopefully you've done some homework. Maybe you had a few chats with the people before you meet them. So you kind of having a rough idea about some of their challenges. And when you can refer back to that and say, I know you've struggled a little bit with this, you say it in an empathetic way so they don't feel you are, you know, putting yourself above them. But you say in a nice way, hey, man, maybe you have a little challenge here. I happen to actually know this because I spent a long time on it. Then they will listen. So diving way more into the problem, less about yourself, less about the solution, at least right away. I would say those are very, very common mistakes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we all know that. We all know that situation. We all have been there, not only once.
Yeah,
But,
it's so easy to talk about yourself. The challenge is to just be curious on the other people and then figure out if you might be able to help them. And having a great sales presentation is also being like, hey, if you don't have any of these problems, well, then I'm not the right guy to help you. So you can kind of say, hey, okay, if you don't have a problem here, no worries. Let's just wrap it up. Guys, I'm out of the way. You call me if you happen to have a problem with that. I think that's important.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about that's also something which goes hand in hand with business presentation, which is the use of PowerPoint. So
yeah,
what do you think? What do you recommend?
Well, a lot of people bash on PowerPoint. And I think PowerPoint can be good. It depends really on the context. What are you presenting? The problem I see with PowerPoint is a lot of people use it as a crutch. They almost can't present without it. And you should be able to do a presentation without it, especially if you want to have some emotions into it. But having PowerPoint can be great. I mean, do you want to show a trend of sales? I mean, that makes sense to present in a chart, right? Yeah. But then you have to simplify it. You don't want to have all the numbers. Maybe you just want to have last year, this thing sold 50% more, right? So you just have a big number, 50% right there, and you have a great picture. Simplify. That is the key with PowerPoint, and then not having to rely too much on it. So know when to use it and when not to. So what I do sometimes is if I use PowerPoint, just have a black slide every now and then, because then the focus gets back on me. I can talk about certain things. So you can black out the screen every now and then. And it's a great way for people who cannot present without PowerPoint. Maybe next time you say, okay, let me put in 3 black slides where I just talk directly to the audience. So you can kind of practice a little bit that way. Yeah. So that's kind of my take on PowerPoint.
I think it's also the thing, the moment people have to do a presentation in their company, the first thing they do is open PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So they don't think about writing their presentation, structuring their presentation, thinking about the goal of the presentation. No, the first thing they do is the PowerPoint, while it has to be just the other way around. First, you do your presentation, you write it, you structure it, and then you prepare the slides which give you support, right?
Yeah, and I'd rather say support the audience. So totally true. Start with the end in mind. What's your message? And then build it up from there. And then maybe slides are good. And then the other thing I also see with a lot of people, I put a lot of text on because then when I send out the slides to my audience, then they can read it. Well, then make 2 sets of slides, one for the presentation, one that you can send out, and great if you can send it out. With a little bit more text, that's okay. Yeah.
I investigated you a little bit. I stalked you a little bit before,
I stalked you too, so
that's my past as a journalist, So I found older video from you, and I really love it when you talk about Barack Obama and the way how he talks and speaks, and especially one technique he's using, which is pauses. And I love pauses. I think it's a super powerful and underrated or underestimated tool, which is used not so often in public speaking, especially when there are newbies. Usually people don't pause, they speak, maybe when they are nervous. How do you teach that? How do you convince people to use more pauses and to endure that silence also on stage?
Yeah, well, great question. Most people will teach, do more pauses. I've been there. Maybe you have even been there. I think most people have been there and know pauses are powerful. But then we get on stage and maybe we remember this for about 5 or 10 seconds. The nerves kick in. We forget. And so what do? So what I am a big fan of is simplifying, right? So when you're on stage, you don't have to think about pausing. You don't have to think about too many things. You don't have to You don't have to worry about where to walk, what to do, these sort of things. So I basically teach my clients, you only have to do 3 things when you're on stage. One is to feel yourself, because when you feel, the tempo goes down. So if I said to you, Wolfgang, feel really fast. Come on, feel. You can't, right? It needs time. So you want to be able to feel yourself. That will slow things down. You will connect maybe to your message. Oh man, what's coming now is really, really valuable. And you let yourself feel that so you can then convey that emotion to your audience. So feel yourself, and that takes time. So you'll notice Obama, he will do that. Like before he starts a talk, during a talk. So, and how can you feel yourself? Maybe you just look down for a little bit, and then you can look back on the audience, connect with them. So you want to feel yourself. You want to, connect with the audience. That could be through eye contact. So you connect with them. And then, so that's also a focus you have to remember to, have eye contact with them. Maybe you want to, at a certain point, connect with a certain part of the audience. You walk over there. So you can move around to connect with them. So that's the second thing you want to think about. And the third is, of course, your content. So you kind of know, okay, what's coming up. So those are the 3 things I teach them to focus on. If you do your homework, you practice at home before you talk, you can manage 3 things. Yeah. So that's the tip. Not to just say pause more or get slammed in the head. Oh, there you go again. You didn't pause there, my friend. So just, connect with yourself instead of running away from it. And this kind of goes back to accepting the fear we talked about a little bit ago, right? If you can accept that, then you stay with the feeling. And funnily enough, it will be diminished. So that's my best tip. But I would love to hear, what's your favorite?
I really love it because it also goes into that direction that when you say just pause, then maybe people make a pause when it doesn't really fit, or they slow down when it doesn't really fit. Whereas when you say, hey, when you are already rehearsing at home, try to feel what you are saying, because that automatically will create the pace of your speech.
Yeah.
So I think this goes a little bit hand in hand, but it's also, from my point of view, also trying out things, because usually we have our pace. And when I rehearse, and I also teach that to my clients, I let them like doing some dynamics during their speech. So they have to slow down artificially in order to see, hey, how does it sound like? And does it fit or it doesn't fit? So go a little bit out of your comfort zone, go away from your usual pace, slow down or speak even faster, because it also makes sense sometimes to be faster. Depends on the story, of course, right? But it's goes a little bit in the direction you are saying. You have to feel it, and you have to feel and to see where a pause makes sense and where it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point you have, not just to slow down. Like when you feel yourself, you change the pace. Like it can be fast. Sometimes you have that energy. You want to be talking fast. And yeah, go out of your comfort zone. I know a lot of actors, it's an acting technique where they put on a mask when they practice. You become someone else. And once you've gone to the extremes, it's so much easier. Maybe say, okay, this is too much, but I've been here. I can go here. Whereas if you just practice to go there, it's too hard during your talk to go there. But if you've been out here, you can go there. It's kind of like if you had done a talk for 2,000 people frequently. Wow, talking to 50 people. What's the problem, man? Come on. Right? You practice with heavier weights.
One thing I do in my trainings is let them giving the speech like an American sports reporter.
Love it.
And that's super fun because, of course, it usually doesn't fit the speech, but it's actually that going completely out of your comfort zone, right? And being totally energetic. And sometimes you can take that energy for some parts of your presentation, right? Especially when you are maybe communicating directly with the audience. And so that's actually a great technique to get out of the comfort zone and to discover new things Also helps with body language, of course, as you already said. Now,
Yeah.
are also doing that. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm probably assuming when you're doing it, because this is what happens to my clients as well, and even myself as well, is when they think they've gone maybe at a 9 or 10 on the scale, you're like, hey, man, this is just a 6. You could go way more, right? Isn't that true?
Yeah, the experience is that it's super fun. You know, these are usually exercises where they have most fun. And I say that was the thing I most enjoyed, because you can go back a little bit to be like a child, because I think children, they are doing this.
Yeah.
They don't do it artificially, but they just have the space. They use their space. You know? They use the range they have. And we as adults, we learned just to move, well, within this range and not that.
Yeah. It shrinks down, man. That's a great exercise. I think I'll keep that one. American sports journalist or speaker. That's great, man.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
From your own experience as public speaker, what would you say is your most important skill?
Well, I think a good talk is comprised of 3 things. You have to be mentally strong so you can go on stage and compose yourself, be confident, connect with the audience. A lot of people train this. A lot of great trainers out there can do a lot of good work on that. So I think, I do that too. Then there's the other thing, which is the very sexy thing, delivery. Like we talk about voice, about body language, all those sort of things, which there are a lot of great trainers out as well. I mean, I do that, you do that. But where I think a lot of people are not putting enough emphasis is really on structure. How do you structure your talk? And it's the easiest thing to learn, because you can sit down and break down a great presentation like to a formula. Like we know the formula for what the brain wants. We know how to engage people. So even if you are not that charismatic, maybe you don't have the best voice yet, and you don't feel that secure, you can always build your content so you have an amazing structure. So what I see is even speakers you would consider not that charismatic, not that great, with a great structure, like, hey, man, that was actually pretty good talk. Like I got something out of that. And you don't need to be a rock star in delivering it. So with my clients, I typically work first on the structure. Then we work a bit on the delivery, nerves as well, if that's a big challenge. And then we kind of build on that. So I think structure is underrated, the value.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. It gives you also the security when you are on stage that you have something to deliver, and you have, I mean, what we talked about before when we talk about a PowerPoint presentation and there's no clear goal. I mean, every speech should have one clear goal.
Of course.
And you have that very clear. And once you have that clear, everything's falls into place, right? I mean, it's all focused on that goal. But the greatest difficulty people have, I think, is to having that goal clear before. Often I see, hey, I have a great story I want to talk about. And then you say, yeah, but what's the goal of that story? And maybe it just doesn't fit the audience.
And it's actually a bit hard to do sometimes, I try to give my clients the challenge that they should make their message in like 15 words or less.
Exactly.
And then the challenge is it should be so easy to understand that a well-functioning 13-year-old would get it. But on the other hand, it should be so difficult that you could spend your entire life chasing it.
Yeah. That's
right? So you have that gap, easy to understand, but, being confident on stage, that's an easy message, but how to do it, you can work on that your entire life, right? So yeah. And then, like you said, if you know your end goal, then you can ask, okay, this story, does that support the message? Does this example support the message? Does this make the problem more relevant, deeper, and really, go deep with that? So yeah, have the end in mind and start with that.
What I see is that it actually takes the most time of the whole process to really be clear about where you want to go, because if you don't have it clear, the audience won't have it clear neither.
No. And I mean, we've all tried that. Watched a great YouTube video with 5 amazing tips, and then 2 minutes later, it's like, what was the video about? Don't know. Because there was no clear direction. in it. We've all been at a talk where, well, each tip they gave in itself were pretty good. But then you're like, what's the overall message? How does this fit together? Right? So the best talks, they go deep, have supporting points on that one topic, because it's easy. I mean, everybody could do that. Share something about something. Go out there and read 5 books on a topic and just share some random tips from those books. Sure, they'll probably be good, each part, but together it won't.
I think we come back to the beginning of our podcast today, and when it's about telling your story. And I always say, please give a speech which can only be done by you. There has to be that personal touch. The
Yeah.
reason why it can only be you talking right now about that topic and the way how to talk about that topic. Because often it's like a Wikipedia page, It's like, okay, I can read that.
Yeah, we don't want a Wikipedia speech. Like I had a client one time, a big fan of Will Smith. So he shared a lot of stories about Will Smith, the things he was doing, jumping off airplanes and all sorts of things. Like, well, great. But why don't you tell me why that inspired you? Seeing that video, what did that do to you? Because that's way more interesting than hearing about that. And then like, I think that was an eye opener.
Yeah, but because it's
for
easier.
him.
It's so much easier to talk about other people than about showing yourself, open up, be vulnerable to your audience, because this is when we come also back again to stage fright. It's totally connected.
Yeah, and it's some introspection. I mean, what did it really do to me? Like, I shared with you in the beginning, like how I got into public speaking. But hey, man, discovering why I became an engineer, that probably took me at least 10 years. Like, hey, man, I'm not doing this for my own reason. I'm doing it to impress someone else. This is pretty dumb. And then when I discovered this is pretty dumb, it still took me a few years to change, right? So
No,
I
I
might be a
think
bit
that's
slow there.
normal. Often we decide things very young in your case, and then later we realize that it's maybe not the way we wanted to go, actually. Asger,
Yeah.
thank you so much. It has been very interesting. All your tips, all your tricks, and all your wisdom you shared with me today. And we are going to see us, I think, on LinkedIn. And thank you very much for being here today. And I hope to have you here again on that podcast in the future.
It was a huge pleasure. Thank you very much for the questions. Thank you very much for the sparring. I mean, I loved it. So yeah, we'll keep our chat going on LinkedIn and hopefully in another episode as well.
Definitely. Okay. Bye.